welcome everyone. This is, as you can tell, you just got a little prelude. This is going to be a very, very exciting talk as part of our Printmakers Festival. This is our second Printmakers Festival at the Georgina Centre for Art and Culture. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I will speak from the heart. In terms of reconciliation, what we're doing today is probably the most active version of reconciliation that we can do as Southern people and non-native, non-Indigenous, and that is to learn, to learn what we weren't taught, to contextualize what we see, especially in the form of art. And this talk, as I mentioned, is going to be a very, very important Canadian art history lesson because Viktor was there, and when the early days of printmaking in the far north, and he'll be able to tell us the honest situation, politics and all. And you should go away from this with a much deeper understanding of that. So thank you again, and without further ado, my dear friend Viktor Tinkl, the one and only. I was so happy he said yes to do this. I was so grateful, Viktor.
Hey, look in the phone book and see how many Tinkls there are. Leave off the T, leave off the L, and what have you got in the middle? I and K, ink. And I use buckets of it, but I guess now a camera is aimed at me. What the hell am I going to say? My God, I've been taped. But when Charlotte said, "Oh, she's going to put on another print show, and do have any idea of people who want to participate?" I said, "Well, I have a few prints from Povungnituk." And she said, "Oh, okay, sure, I'll put them in." And then she said, "Well, do you think you might be interested in doing a little talk?" And suddenly I, not because I'm shy in front of an audience, but it would intrude in my need for solitude and to cultivate solitude as opposed to loneliness. So, but then a few weeks passed, and Charlotte said, "Well, I got you booked in for October the 6th. Now, since the opening 3 weeks ago, I've had sleepless nights up to now, because memories and images kept moving around. Come on, I'm an old fossil. I'm reaching back 62 some years to the Arctic as a young man of 25, and then going back even 40 to make up the sum of 87. And it moves back and forth and interweaves, and it's fantastic. My brain just kept churning and churning and churning. Now that wasn't negative. I enjoyed this reliving of a very intense experience for 2 years. And come on, what's 2 years, right? And so I went with it. Okay, this brings you closer to the area. Okay, here is Povungnituk, and here is Cape Dorset, where it all started, and down here is Toronto. I can no longer print a Catholic oblate priest about 23 or 24 years old who landed in Bacon Bay in Northern Quebec. That's at the tip. And he got off the boat. He didn't speak English. He didn't speak Inuit. He spoke French. He stayed in the northern area for a few years. And then apparently a place called Povungnituk, which literal translation is a place that stinks or smells, because it was a slaughtering ground for game. So it's a very positive name. And Povungnituk is a pretty nice town. It runs of my town. Okay. And so we decided this is where I'm going to make my mission to help the people to a better way of life. Because our culture was encroaching on these people. Slowly, but it was happened step by step. And he was sort of a buffer. So he didn't go up there to save their souls. He said, I went there to fill their bellies improve their living conditions, okay? He built a mission on the river on the opposite side of the native settlement, because the outsiders, the Kablunas, the outsiders, if you were black, green, or orange, they all called you Kabluna, lived on this side. In between was the native settlement, and he built his mission on the other side. But all the carvings at the time were funneled through the Hudson Bay Company. Now the Hudson Bay Company wasn't up there for the good of the people. It was total exploitation. So Johnny might come in and there's a fantastic carving, and he puts it on in front of the buyer of the Hudson Bay, and he would say, well, Johnny, I'll give you $10 for this. And I looked at it and said, holy mackerel, if I could afford it, I'd pay a couple $100 for it right now, but I don't have 200. I'll give you half of $20, $10, and the other half, $10, I'll look, oh, in your book you still owe us, you have to pay the debt. Now he was at the Hudson Bay store and also being seduced by all these bloody trinkets, which they didn't really need, but they wanted them, they're fun. Coca-Cola, chocolate bars, all the things which we think make us happy, okay. And so very often, the Inuit Eskimo walked out of the store with no cash in hand, because he already spent it. So the priest saw that and he said, I gotta do something about that. And he knew he was seeing some powerful stuff from the people as far as expression and carving goes. And he said, listen folks, would you be interested in forming a cooperative? The Sculptor Society, First Eskimo Sculptor Society of the North. And they all agreed, because now they could decide the prices on their carvings and how they're going to sell them, okay? And it worked. Father Steinman took a couple of suitcases, a couple of Eskimos, Inuit, and traveled through the south, trying to promote more and more. But because of the political situation, it was kind of hard. But he was a connector. He connected with people. But listen, when you have a suitcase with half a dozen carvings in them, God, that weighs about 100 pounds each suitcase. And the airline says, well, wait a minute, we're going to charge you for this, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So usually when carvings came in, they would be collected, put in storage, and then wrapped, crated, and waiting to be delivered by boat, which came in once a year, to take them down south. Okay? And it was a slow trickling process. And it worked. And like I say, Father Steinman made connections. The Caisse Populaire in Quebec helped. The Quebec government, provincial government was a little bit hesitant, because how the federals were still telling the top of half of Quebec what to do, okay? And there was also the question, well, how come you got this guy from Ontario coming in, printmaking and so on, when we could use somebody from Quebec, but nobody could be found from Quebec to go up there. So James Houston came there wanting to paint the people, and then he saw a similar thing that Andrew Steinman had experienced. There's some fantastic carvings being funneled into the Hudson Bay. And he also did a similar thing, formed a society, organized the people. In the meantime, the federal government didn't have an administrator up there for 60,000 square miles. So this guy who went up to be just paint the Inuit, suddenly became the administrator of a northern region, okay? And that's fine. He did his utmost to promote his people just like Steinman did. I didn't have a clue about any of this stuff. Hell, I was down south. But James Houston did something else. And the carvings were encouraged to make money, make the economy. James Houston made a small booklet with illustrations of you the natives might carve. Houston left the Arctic after he had done all he could, after 12 years, and it enhanced his reputation because he was the great white father who opened up printmaking, and I give him all the credit for that. A new fellow came in, called Terry Ryan, who had to take over, you know Terry?
Yes.
Terry Ryan had to take over the position of James Houston. So automatically he became the administrator, and he traveled also for thousands of miles across Canada to Europe, to America, to promote the Inuit art. But he was a little bit different than James Houston. I always had the feeling he wasn't quite sure that that was what we should do, but I mean, you gotta do something to get past and make a few bucks, right? And he stayed for 40 years. I met him, I had great admiration for Terry. The odd times we met, possible. Houston had good control of the Inuit language, but he didn't have the ability to explain the technology, reproduction technology. Now the carver just happened to have brought along a piece of bone, fairly flat, well polished, into which he had gouged lines and then rubbed soot into it. Okay. And Houston looked at it and said, I think I know how to explain this to him. So he apparently poured off some water from in which ink, in a can which had been inked, and it froze in ink. It separated, and there was a sludge, black sludge on the bottom. He stuck his fingers in there, and he started dabbing the ink on the bone. And then he grabbed a piece of toilet paper and put it on top and started rubbing gently on the back. And then he pulled it off, and the Inuit looked at Houston and said, we can do that. Are you sure? The Inuit said, we can do that. Houston saw suddenly the opportunity to print money, because come on, shipping stone, paper you can ship back and forth very quickly by plane, okay? And so they developed printing in pretty, primitive conditions first. They experimented with making ink out of polar bear grease and soot, making brushes out of polar bear hair tied together for being stencils. A lot of experimentation, and that was a messy process. But from my point of view, a mess today is your technique tomorrow. But that's another story. But somebody said, well, we have to be real. We have to be real about it. And Houston decided he needed to go to Japan to learn printmaking from the master printmakers in Japan. Terrific printmakers, woodcuts, and so on. And so he went. Hell, he could have gone to the Ontario College of Art, okay. Come on. Woodcuts aren't that hard, lino cuts aren't that difficult, nor is stone, but I want to tell you right now, if it isn't hot in the, or warm in the room, the temperature of stone is near freezing, the ink won't stick to it, and then it takes a long time to heat up the space. So the federal government came to the rescue and said, we will build you a more comfortable place to do your work. Houston came back and he applied the printmaking technique that the Japanese use, a collaboration between the designer, the cutter, and the printer. And if you look at some of their early prints, which I haven't got only in the book, there are 3 little stamps, so each person got credit for it. Okay? That's fine, no problem there, okay. And the prints, after a little while, they were successful. hit the southern market. And again, there was a frenzy. Wow, I gotta have one of those things. I walked past the Ontario Art Gallery. People were queuing. And I said, what the hell's going on here? And they said, haven't you heard these prints from the north? I gotta have one. I went to see the show, but I can't get the print right away. I have to line up to the gift shop, and suddenly, I want this print, this print. There's only 30 prints of that design. Oh my God, I've lined all this time, and I can't buy this print, it's gone. Would you mind settling for another print? Well, maybe or no. So there was really a frenzy. And they said, Tinkl, you gotta go and see this show. And I said, yeah, eventually I'll get around to it. Because I was walking back to an apartment very reluctantly that I had rented on Spadina, and I'll get into that. They sold. Meanwhile, Father Steinman said, well, wait a minute. If they're producing prints, I have powerful carvers here too. They equally can make strong prints. And the Southern control people said, we better form a committee this time to control the quality of prints, which was not the case for the carvings, okay? Because prints suddenly had to be controlled. And on that committee, there was no Inuit or Eskimo member, as far as I could understand. It is all a bunch of white guys in high positions who apparently knew what is what. But Andy Steinman asked, and they said, well, POE, if you want to pull prints, well, maybe we can do it this way. You send us drawings to our place, and we'll decide whether these drawings are acceptable to make prints, and then you're going to make a proof, and you're going to ship it back to us, and we're going to decide whether the print should be made in series. Okay. And Andrew Steinman said, well, and Dorset for a while, not the Inuit, Dorset for a while thought the only strong artistic expression coming out of the Arctic is coming from Dorset. And that's where the politics really starts. And Steinman said, well, screw this. I'm going to get my own guy up here to lead the workshop. So a young man graduate from the Ontario College of Art, not me, was brought in. He had several good intentions, but most of them after I realized, holy cats, he's one of these instructors who stands behind you and tells you what you should do and do and do, so your work will become better. In other words, he was red penciling their drawings and so on. So he was kicked out. Now suddenly, the village had nobody a buffer. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? There was a president, or what do we call them, at the Ontario, vice president at the Ontario College of Art. You might know her name, called George Pepper, anybody? Mm-hmm. And his wife Kathleen, I think. And they had met Father Steinman because they too wanted to paint the Eskimo. And Steinman said, well, why don't you come up to our village and I can put you up in my mission? And they did. And when this whole thing busted, Steinman said, well, maybe, George, you could find another person to come up here. And he said, and Pepper said, well, okay, I have a guy by the name of Gustav Weisman, who was my instructor, and we over the years became very, very good friends. He opened many cracks that I could finally push through myself, but he was very supportive. I wanted to go north. Now, Gus Weisman had a place north of Toronto in the bush in A-frame, and he allowed me every so often for me to rent a car and stay up there and get my head together, saying, this is what I want to do. I want to live in seclusion up here. And no, that isn't going to be possible. I cannot afford it. And this went on for several, when I think of it now, my God, I moved in at the end of 60, and I didn't get a chance to go north to POV until 62 July. And then one day Gus came and said, well, listen, you're talking about getting away from it all. Would you consider going north to a village where the print shop went bust? Listen, I'd never taken a print shop in my life. Well, okay, I know about wood cutting, but you cut away, doesn't print, liner the same as stone. But the rest of the techniques, I didn't really know. What I know about printmaking was the German expressionist prints. Very raw, very direct, no fooling around, no niceties, bang, there it is, okay? And boy, that really was exciting. But I still didn't want to do woodcuts. I wanted to smear paint around and do a lot of ink drawings. So that's it. So would you like to go up there? Oh God, how am I going to bluff my way through that one now? I said, sure, I'll go. Don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know why I'm doing it, but I'm going to do it. Don't know why I'm doing it. Got to do something. And it happened very, very quickly. I said, yes, I'm interested. And they said, okay, we make arrangement for you to meet somebody from the government who will interview you to see whether you're a suitable one to replace the previous instructor, because hell, they didn't want to invest in another guy who's going to screw it all up. So in the afternoon, I was supposed to meet the priest, Father Steinmann. Okay, we'll deal with it. So in the morning I met, I can't remember his name, and I still remember that moment. We were in the Arts and Letters Club, and we had tea and cake, and the last question was, when he looked at me, he said, do you know what it feels like, I told you that before, right? What it feels like to be lonely? How do I answer that? And you probably remember it maybe. And I thought about it, thought, I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm surrounded by a city of I don't know how many people, and I feel bloody lonely. I feel very lonely. What I would like to do is cultivate, it's kind of pretentious, cultivate my solitude. And he said, thank you very much, Mr. Tinkl. We will not give you notification in 2 days, because it had freeze up, break up, all those things. And in the afternoon, I met the priest, and he came in. And as soon as he came in, I said to myself, this is a guy I can work with. It was just an immediate feeling. We shook hands, and I said, well, I'm Viktor Tinkl. And he said, I'm Andre Steinmann. Don't call me father, because I'm not your father. Okay. The next day, I get a notice saying, get ready, you're heading for Povungnituk. Holy cats, what am I getting into? So in desperation, I went to a good friend. Anybody know Bob Patterson?
Oh.
Yeah, maybe for some of your instructor. And he was a very passionate printmaker. And I thought, this is the guy I'm going to go see to clue me in what I might do. And so I said, Bob, I'm leaving in a couple of days. What should I know? And he said, do you know what a brayer is? Now, those of you who don't make prints, do you know what a brayer is?
Yes.
A brayer is a roller with a piece of gelatin on, and he said you put the ink down and you roll the brayer into the ink, and then you transfer it to the surface. And in 5 minutes, I learned that I don't have to take a printmaking workshop. So I went north, armed, I know how to use a brayer. Whoa! A voice next to me said, well, mate, if you want to have a lift to your village, I can give you a lift. Tomorrow, first thing. Okay. Now, he was an Australian geologist. The guys who study rock and soil minerals. And he said, I have to go up to Baffin Island and do my thing. I can give you a lift. The only trouble is, I don't have room for you to sit in the passenger seat. It was just a little plane, one propeller. But there's about this much room, from the baggage to the top of the plane. You will have to lie down. And actually, it was pretty good. We put a couple of blankets down, and we took off. And as I looked down, there was this carpet. No trees as we know them, just rocks and lakes and rocks and lakes and marsh. And it was incredible, like a Persian carpet. And I didn't have a camera. I didn't make notes, but my brain went click, 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 click. And as we are going along, the greenness changes to sort of a brownish mass on the horizon, a vast mass on the horizon. And you couldn't have conversations because it was too loud in the plane. And he yelled back, "Victor, watch!" And he took a dive down, and what I experienced was this sprint repeated I don't know how many thousands times the caribou. And he yelled back, "Do you want to see it again?" And I said, "No, I've got it, I've got it." Okay, that was another introduction. Fortunately, I had missed the plane. I would never have seen any if I hadn't missed the plane. Okay, somebody was looking out for me. And then a few hours later, he said, "Okay, your destination, but I'm not going to stop here." And he landed, and there was this village, and it was a hell of a hot day. But climate change wasn't in the question yet at that time. The kids were playing the river, and I couldn't figure out how come there were ice flows on the side of the river further down, but there's no ice flows on this river. The kids were running in and out of the water, having a lot of fun. And the minister came to pick me up from the plane, Pat, and we immediately, I don't know, it's crazy, but we immediately bonded. Just all done. And he found me a little house about 20 by 25 feet on stilts, under which lived about a dozen female huskies with their pups. And it became my home up there for over 2 years. There was no welcome in the village. Nobody came to see me. And Pat said, "Well, the people are just gradually coming back from the outlying districts from their hunting and bringing back their carvings and seals and so on." And so it was casual. Nobody made a welcome and say, "Oh, you're going to start printing, boom, boom, boom." I could spend about 2 weeks just casually getting acquainted, saying hello, learning to say hello. Well, it's another story. So I went to the print shop. I was very plain, very bare. I figured, well, we have to make a better situation, at least by providing more table space inside, okay? And I always used to pride myself on my grandfather saying, if you can do it yourself, do it yourself. You won't have to say please or thank you. And at one time I could lift some fairly heavy things, and if not physically, I could lift them with the head. Okay, just figure it out. Outside the print shop, there are about 4 or 5 leftover sheets from building the building, which would make suitable tables. I just barely got one up this way, and I figured, well, I'll be able to push it into there. And as I was standing there, I heard a voice behind me that said, "You need help." It wasn't somebody saying, "Do you need help?" No, fuck off, I don't need help. And I said, "Yes, I certainly do." And this young man, Inuit, he's right there, came back early. He was 5 years younger than me from the hunting grounds. And Inuit knew a bit of English, because I knew none of their language. And he helped me to reorganize the shop for a more practical thing. Then, still a week passed, and then Inuit said, most of the people are back from their camps, and there will be the buying of carvings in the house where they buy carvings, the co-op. okay, I really like to see it, because it gave me a chance to look at the carvings and figure, hey, I really think this carving is great. Consequently, you should be able to make a fantastic print. And Kennedy whispered in my ear and said whose name it was. But outside the print shop was a little old lady, Inuit, right there. And this is her work. Standing there. Well, like the bucks came in and carried their carvings and went out in the morning. And Annie just stood there. She was a rotund little lady with a generous bosom, and she was clutching a bundle here. And she stood there a long time. And I stood there a long time wondering, what the heck is this woman holding? Finally, after several hours, the stream of important buyers left, and she went to the front of the desk and she unwrapped her bundle. And as soon as I saw that bundle, I nearly bowled her over. My arm shook out and I put my hand on it. And what do you think I felt? I've told this story before. What do you think I felt after a generous, buxom lady is holding a stone between the bosom? Warmth. Suddenly, the spirit of Inuit moved into me. Wow. Now, you don't get it in a conventional southern print shop to learn, right? Annie wasn't that keen on making prints. She said, no, stone is too hard, and so on and so on. In the meantime, I also had two men I asked, those we need stones polished to make prints, and those who don't want to carve with polished stones, I leave it up to them to choose the largest area of the stone to make prints on. And some of the stones would be this thick. So a stone like this would weigh over 100 pounds, be this thick, and I hated to see this cut disappear to make another cut, because the relief carving was so fantastic. Okay. So Annie said, no, it's too hard, I won't do it. So I put a stone there, and Annie kept looking what other people were doing. And suddenly I noticed Annie thought I wasn't looking, grabbed the stone and pushed it in a partner and went off. Okay. And then she came back a while later, and this was the first carving that Annie Mick did, telling her stories, just scratching in, just like you do an etching, I guess. There's a piece up here, which is a legend, and so on. This here was a dueling ground across the river, so if you had any differences between you, the dueling ground was only maybe 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet, okay? And if you had a difference, you'd go back and forth, and at a given moment, you step in the center, meet your opponent, and try to dispatch him. That dueling ground was carved into the moss. It was no longer used then. Maybe it was, I don't know. And she explained it to me. Finally, they said, well, all the people are back. We must have the meeting. What's going to happen? And down in the meeting place, in Father Steinman's mission, a lot of people showed up to look at this new guy who probably is going to promise them a lot of things and not do a damn thing. Okay? And so I saw all these faces, and not many of them were smiling at me, because I was just in a blowhard coming in and figuring I had all the answers. So I said, look, I'm not going to, through my interpreter, Kanayu, I'm not going to interfere in any of the designs in the stores. That's absolutely up to you. And okay. In the meantime, a lot of stones were polished. You could take it home. And I said, okay, if you're going to start, I don't want to have drawings of what you want to do. Just grab a stone and go into it. And that seemed to appeal to them. And suddenly, these stones came back. lots of stones. Everybody was going crazy carving, but you could only print so many of them for the market. Okay, so again, it was sort of my job to select which prints should be included. My contract with the federal government was only for 1 year probation. During the time, whenever possible, I was supposed to sit down and write a report. They asked the wrong guy about that, but I didn't review that. Pat, the Englishman, the administrator, said, "Vic, no wonder. I'm the bureaucrat, I love writing," and he sat down and he typed out letters. Just before Christmas, when the ice frozen and planes could land, I sent a message down to the committee who was going to judge prints. I said, "We are ready for you to look at the prints." And I got a message saying, "Well, no, you can't. You're supposed to be there for a year, and at the end of the year, we'll look at your prints." "No, screw it, guys. I'm coming down now. You're going to look at these prints." Got on the first plane out, met the committee, and there were some heavy hitters in that committee in the art world who were supposed to know quality and Indian work and Eskimo work. Okay, they looked at our prints and said, "These are fantastic. Wow." And because it was too short, the print, the new catalog was coming out the following after Christmas. For the one and only time, Dorset was by then doing etchings or whatever. Some of you printed no more with us, and we were shared a catalog. In addition, usually prints get signed underneath and so on, and a lot of the Dorset prints were signed in English. And I said, "Well, geez, I'm not going to sit down and sign these damn prints in English. It's your language, your syllabics, you sign them." And that made sense, for the syllabics were underneath. The outside world said, "Holy mackerel, look at, I don't know what they're saying," but it's no problem, because on the back will be a translation of what you're reading in the front. And was it a competition? I hope it wasn't. And it went on for a while. Distribution was always difficult. And fall came also, that's a little bit far. We went to the print shop. It was kind of cold, near freeze up. And Kanayuk said, "It's getting dark, you should go home. There's a storm coming." Doesn't look like a storm. What do you mean the storm's coming? And they all left, because Kabluna, the white man, knows what he's doing. But to get from my house to the print shop, I had to follow terrain like so, and around this rock and that rock, till I finally get to the print shop. And I did the reverse, and there were hundreds of times, during the 2 months I was there. So I'll do it again. Oh yeah, smart guy. Turned dark, black, snow came down, but snow, from my experience in the Arctic, doesn't just come down gently. The wind comes and it hits the snow, packs it tight, hence the material for building igloos. Okay. And so I figured, well, I think I'll get by, it's no problem, it's only a quarter mile, I guess. I'll find a big rock I have to go around. And I started walking, and I realized, hell, the big rock isn't coming. I should by now be seeing it. But I couldn't see it. Have you been in a whiteout? I mean, in a real whiteout, where you stick out your hand and you can't see your hand? That's exhilarating, terrifying, all the emotions go through you. Survival mode, I was told. If that's the case, and hopefully you're well dressed, just curl up in a ball and wait for the storm to pass by. Yeah, but storms can last a few hours, storms can last a few days. Hell, nobody's ever going to find me. Drifts build up very, very quickly. And thank God for the outsider health providers. They had built a nursing station 2 stories high with big windows, 8 big windows, the last house in the village. And when I thought, oh Christ, I guess this is it. Hey, listen, I'm using the name Christ. Have I become a believer? Look, I'm looking unhappy about it. And suddenly, just before I thought, well, this is it, I saw the lights diffuse through the snow, and I had hit the final building in the village. I stumbled in. The nurses were Australian. They were another story, fantastic. And I sheepishly said, well, I'm sort of lost. I stayed the night, and the storm died down, and the following morning I went back to my house, which I could just see above about a 10-foot snowdrift all around my little house. The little house was standing free in the center, quite free from the drift, not buried by the drift. I guess the snow just was whirling around and built up the snow. What a fantastic installation, eh? Organized. And I clambered over that thing to get into my house, got a shovel, and tried to dig a tunnel to get out, and I could crawl through the tunnel, in and out. That was one hell of an experience. So if I wouldn't be here if I hadn't hit the corner of the nursing station. And then I realized I have to get out of the north, because I didn't go there, I didn't want to go to the north. I had to explore my own need of solitudes. But I was convinced to take on another year. Well, the year passed quickly. The second portfolio that I took south, the Eskimo Committee evaluation people, there were only one or two left, and many of the other ones were new. And when I presented my portfolio, one guy would say, I still remember this guy, hey, well, okay, I'll ask you a question. Should we, you're the committee now, should we include this print in the next edition, or do you think we should just say screw it? Leave it out. Okay. So one guy came along and he said, well, it's very nice, but I think it would have been better if this horn here were more here, and this shape bothers me here. And I started listening, and another guy agreed. And the two guys who were really the first original ones didn't say anything. And I figured, holy cats, they're picking these prints apart for the most asinine reasons. Have you ever seen a caribou? None of them have ever seen a caribou. Who really cares? And suddenly I felt, okay, what am I going to do? And I slammed the portfolio shut and I said, gentlemen, the meeting is over. What the hell am I doing? I'm saying no to the support group who can distribute the thing. Now while I'm thinking about, I wasn't teaching right, how to answer the question. How would you, when somebody says, what are you doing, you're not teaching right? Now, the priest wasn't there to interpret, so I simply took one of his stones, maybe Maggie stones, Sayuli stone, and we laid them all out, and I said, look, when David Yallop cuts, he doesn't have to cut a quarter or half an inch deep into the stone, but that's his nature of cutting. Annie, who feels the stone is too hard, of course she'll just scratch. Making prints of this stone wasn't difficult, but some stones, after a while you had to clean off completely and start all over again to get a clear image. But it's no big deal. And then there's some, and then Sayuli was sort of in between. And apparently that made sense to them. That they're all individuals, and I'm not going to interfere with what they're doing. Now that was a learning moment for me, because down here often I was said, I think what you're doing is a pile of crap. Who are you to tell me I'm doing a pile of crap? And then they walk away, and I'm listening, God, they must know that my piece is a pile of crap. What am I going to do? Never see them again. So this clash between society in my mind. But then I said, okay, one more year. But anyways, the second portfolio was taken over by Case Bucky there. It's very supportive. The provincial government started to insist they saw they had something going. And we managed to produce the first independent catalog completely from POE. Here's this guy and this guy is over here. Okay. And I said, well, you people are very well in control of what you want to do. You don't need me anymore, but I'm not going to let you hang completely. I'm going to call down to the south and see whether a replacement can be made for me. But like I said, I'm sidetracked. In the meantime, I met Judith. I said, well, let's get married and see how it works. Really, okay. I have a place in the country. There's no running water. The toilet is inside outside. There's no central heating. In centennial year 1967, I got a call saying, Victor, would you come up to Povungnituk again? I said, well, for a short period, but I cannot stay. We are thinking of textile printing. What the hell do you know about textile printing? But I thought, well, this is an opportunity for my new wife to experience what I experienced and all the stories that I had either been boring her with and so on. And we went up to Povungnituk. In the summer, a bulldozer had been brought into Povungnituk from the supply ship and a bulldozer driver, because they figured we don't want to rely on freeze up and break up anymore. Because freeze up and break up means for 3 months each section you're isolated from the rest of the world. And you have to remember, there were no cell phones, only shortwave radio. And so we went up there to Povungnituk, did paste ups and so on. And I said, well, you will have to find somewhere in the south to start this textile thing, but it sort of sent down, the samples we made, and it sort of didn't get off the ground. I more or less kept in touch as the years went by, but then less and less and less.
I have 2 questions for you, Victor. Did you make any prints when you were
No.
in Povungnituk?
No.
None at all?
No, not at all.
Oh.
I did a lot of drawing. Not drawing the Inuit, but just drawing to get the angst out of my system, okay? I didn't go up there I drew constantly to sort of whatever was going on in my head. I made drawings which I thought one day will be exhibited, but fat chance who wants to hang my angst drawings on their walls. And so now I'm using them for wallpaper and ceiling covers. No, I didn't do any prints.
Okay, my second question is, how did the Inuit learn the Cyrillic alphabet?
The Cyrillic alphabet, you can look it up. Apparently, it was introduced to the Inuit by an Anglican missionary adapting from the Cree. They had a writing. Am I wrong? Am I right? They had a written language using the syllabics.
Cree people? You mean the Cree?
The Indians had a writing, yeah. Among the Eskimos, no. It was an oral passing down stories. So I can't answer it completely for you.
Well, I'm curious because when I was at U of T, I was connected with the professor there who had a Cree assistant, and they created that alphabet.
Well, they created the alphabet for the Cree or for the Inuit.
The Cree.
Okay, but the missionary came along and saw that, apparently, and said, okay, I'm going to take this Cree alphabet and adapt it for the Inuit. But look it up, research it, I don't know.
No. At least now somebody knows a little bit about that, but apparently it is an incredibly rich language.
The sound, one thing I found very enjoyable, we were in the room And at first people would say, Victory Nine, and I'd say, hello. And Kenny said, no. When you hear Victory Nine, you say, ah. And then again, Victory Nine, ah. Then I heard the people. Mary would call over and say, it's just begun. And Josephine would say, Arr! Just begun the next time, ah, his mood had changed. You know what I mean? And that went on all day long, and it was fantastic. And I got caught up into it. Yes,
Victor, thank you. What a brilliant talk. It really interesting. You took us
And I thought, well, I'm going to make an experiment. And there was a young man who did wonderful drawings, just incredible drawings. And I looked around at the carvers and I said, which of these carvers could interpret his drawings? And I chose Sayuli. Sayuli was a terrific guy. They all were, anyways. And Sayuli, because the original drawer of the designs didn't want to cut stone. He wasn't interested. And so I said, Sayuli, would you mind cutting somebody else's design? And Sayuli, OC, you might think, do you want to hand this around? Just hand it around. Contribute your warmth to the stone, leave a scratch on it. Remember, Manimictigus energy. As Sayuli came up with this. It's a beautiful print, isn't it? But it's a true following of, I can't remember the artist now, of the lines. Okay. When the original artist saw that, he got very excited. Oh, now I'm going to cut. So sure, I'll go ahead and cut. But his style produced these kind of prints.
Can you lift it higher?
That's a pretty good print. Nothing wrong with it.
No.
So from, I think the Japanese, the Hira printmakers cut, usually the rice paper is glued up to the block, right? And then they follow it, the George. Yeah, so, but when he saw that, he got very excited and he pulled his prints. I mean, that's what I was there for. Do your own stuff.
Did you have to explain the mirror writing? Like they had to reverse their letters?
They very soon learned that. They soon caught on. They had to scratch things in reverse to print positive. I mean, the inventiveness of these people put me to shame. Houses like boxcars, they're brought from the south for the people to live in. I mean, they look like regular boxcars. A fairly generous window, a door, but only a loop about this big for ventilation. Because whoever designed them down south said, well, it's cold, so we don't want to have too many openings. Okay? And when I walked into one first, there were things all over the floor, just like an igloo. And I said, maybe we should build bunk beds. And Inuit said, bunk beds? What are bunk beds? And I said, well, you sleep on top of each other. So we went and scrounged some packing crate material that was abundant, and I started building the first bunk bed. And a week later, when I walked into the house, there was lots of room, and they all had their bunk beds. So again, it was a learning experience. When a print was pulled, everybody gathered around this excitement of what you had done. Okay, no matter what kind of print, that was really positive. Joe's coming, and Joe, like Annie, unfolded, and there was this boat, very crudely carved. And his fellow carvers always thought Joe's carvings are a little bit too crude, because in the Houston booklet there was a saying, and it would be good that you polish your carvings a bit, because that's the way white people like it. So anyways, and they were surprised that the outsiders suddenly bought all of Joe's stuff. What the hell's going on there? And Joe's things, God, the soul, the integrity, the jolly guy. And okay, so we sat her there, and I said, Joe, all I can afford to give you is $125. Whoa, that's a big chunk of my wages. I could have said, Joe, I can only give you $50. Would he have decided to take it to the co-op or to the Hudson Bay? And he said, Mariano, it's good, I take it. Big smile, and left. And so I talked to the evaluator, the young woman, and I said, well, what is one of Joe's boats going now? And she said, the last boat sold was around for, $850 or $900,000. Now, can you see the $20 bills stacked next to both? All these things, Joe's boats sailing through those things. I thought, what kind of bloody world am I living in? And I kept working on this solitude, but still not cutting myself off completely. Luckily, I had a great partner to help me along the way. And here I am, an old fossil of 87, sweating like crazy. And the open should go outside, and it's 50 below, so that I can cool off. Originally, it would be the hardest stone or bone you can find, okay. And eventually, the missionaries introduced tools and so on. An aeroplane had crashed in Povungnituk across the river. And the people went over there and helped themselves to bits and pieces to fashion the ulu. There you go. The fingers would be tickling the ground. So much for proportions. And if you had it proportionally, it wouldn't be as effective. So, the woman's knife. You can scrape, you can cut, you can rip, you can cut your meat. And Gus Wiseman, who was an instructor at the college at that time, there was only 11 years difference between him being the instructor and me being his student. And we became very firm friends. He opened a lot of doors for me. And he said, well, maybe you would like to go back and teach the college. Whew. That wasn't a good idea, because all the things I felt to deal with the spirit, just you didn't want to deal with in our institution. And the story I told before, I once said, what do you do in the college? Fanny, you asked. I said, well, there are places where people go to learn to draw. And he said, you mean you go to a place to learn to draw? So when people say, oh, I don't know how to draw, and it's impossible to draw. Come on, you all know how to draw. You all know how to leave a mark behind. And the mark describes itself. It doesn't have to look like an apple or orange or your cousin or uncle. Okay, the energy of a line, a kid seeing the first mark. Can you remember when you made your first mark? Whoopee! No, don't do that. You're making the surface clean. You're doing the wall. Okay, fair enough.
I think Charlotte has
2 o'clock?
got her, yeah.
Okay, the bell is ringing. The print shop in POV closed in around 1985. This incredible new modern air-conditioned heated building going up, and guess what it says on the outside, a big lettering, studios. Where at one time, studios, artists, they're simply the people who are doing this as another part of our life. So we finally have them, and in Dorset, they are now churning out young artists. Oh, yes. The polar bear was the hunter came out from the same stone. So
They polished it down.
well, then it was ground down again,
and the next person got a chance. If you could take these prints out and put it on top of each other,
It's
you
amazing.
would see how this would change.